Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Deputy President. I too rise to speak on the Commission of Inquiry Antisemitism at Australian Universities Bill 2024, and I do so with a very heavy heart, and I find it almost inconceivable that in this day and age this bill is necessary. And I commend my colleague, Senator Henderson, for her leadership in this area. I participated in the hearings of this bill, and I was utterly dismayed to hear some of the responses of the Chancellors, but particularly the Australian Human Rights Commission, who were completely blind to this most ancient and wicked form of discrimination. So I start by making this observation that there is and can never be security nor safety in appeasement, whether there is appeasement of dictators or anti-Semites or others who wish others harm. There is no peace and there is no security in appeasement. And in fact, I've before quoted Winston Churchill, who in 1940 observed that each one hopes, this is appeasers, each one hopes that if he feeds the crocodile enough, the crocodile will eat him last. And all of them hope that the storm will pass before their time comes to be devoured. And in recent years it's been shortened to, an appeaser is one who feeds the crocodile, hoping it will eat him last. Now, sadly and almost unbelievably, today in our nation, this is what we are now getting from our Prime Minister. Whether it is standing up with our democratic allies and friends to fight back against dictators who hate us, who hate democracy, and who have formed an axis of evil to support each other's activities. So Russia in the Ukraine. Remember, a decade ago, the West appeased him, Putin. And what did he do? He was emboldened by it, and he came back for more and much more of Ukraine. And today here in Australia, we are seeing and witnessing the most extraordinary acts of hate against Jewish Australians. And not only are we seeing it across the nation, but we are now seeing it, and in fact arguably it started in our universities with the radicalisation of our students and the complete failure of leadership by a number of Vice-Chancellors turning to mush in the face of this, whether it was because it ideologically wasn't their flavour or whether they were just afraid. But they appeased the voices of hate and hatred and the acts that accompanied that. So, as the university students return for this academic year, everybody in our universities have a right to be safe. Now, I had the great privilege of attending the Holocaust's 80th commemorative service in Perth. And can I thank and commend the Australian Jewish community? It was a most powerful service, and both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition attended. Sadly, it looked like the Prime Minister was in witness protection, sort of flanked and protected by the Premier of Western Australia. But I was so proud to see so many Liberal colleagues there, along with the Leader of the Opposition. But amongst the many moving speeches we heard from West Australian students about the impact that this has had on their mental health, on their sense of security, sense of identity here in Australia, the Director of Education of the Holocaust Institute of Western Australia, Judith Lawrence, made an astonishing speech. And she's given me permission to read some of what she said, because I, in my own words, can't do justice to what she said. She said, "How was the Holocaust humanly possible? The question haunts us still. The Holocaust was not the product of one moment, nor of one man. It was the result of a world that allowed hatred to take root unchecked until it reached its most horrific expression. It started small: words, propaganda, exclusion, discrimination, violence, extermination. It was gradual until it was sudden. And just to pause there, all of those things, bar the ultimate expression of that in terms of extermination, are things that until now, 18 months or more, have gone unchecked. And as she said, it was gradual until it was sudden. And as she said, as we reflected on this year's theme, which was for a better future, as Australians we must all ask ourselves, what have we learnt from history? Change does not happen overnight. It is gradual, insignificant in a single act, but transformative over time. And that is sadly exactly what we are seeing here in Australia today. With the small but powerful, consistent choices we make daily to challenge hate, to open conversations and to foster understanding. Now, we on this side of the chamber understand that, but we need everybody in this chamber to stand up, to call it out and to stamp out hate. And Judith Lawrence also said this: 80 years later, the lessons of the Holocaust remain painfully relevant. Here in Australia, we are witnessing a rise in blatant anti-Semitism, swastikas smeared publicly, verbal attacks on Jewish individuals, doxing of the art community. It is gradual until it is sudden. The Addis Synagogue in Melbourne burnt to the ground, firebombed cars and daycare centres in Sydney. Attacks on private homes, violent rhetoric and intimidation of Jewish communities. It is gradual until it is sudden. She made this observation, which sadly is also very true. The Holocaust was not an aberration of history, it was a warning. And since then, as we have seen, there have been far too many other genocides over the past 80 years. The patterns of hatred that led to Auschwitz did not begin in 1933, nor did they end in 1945. As she said, the anti-Semitism we see today is not new, but it has morphed. The same deeply ingrained Jew hate that has been repackaged through modern narratives, and I would also add through social media, and adapted to fit contemporary political and ideological movements. But today, the same rhetoric of dehumanisation, of blood libels, of conspiracy theories and scapegoating is being used against Jews globally. It is an indication of broader societal decay. The failure to combat it undermines our social cohesion, and sadly, that is very true today. And I'll just finish with these last comments. I'll finish with these comments of Ms. Lawrence. If we are to truly create a better future, we must recognise these patterns of hate and refuse to allow history to repeat itself. The Holocaust teaches us what happens when prejudice is left unchecked, when silence allows bigotry to grow, and when moral leadership fails to take a stand. And again, as I said, I find it inconceivable that here in Australia today, these attacks, this violence, this anti-Semitism has been allowed to grow unchecked by this government, state and federal. So what does that mean? It means that somehow we need to find a way to come together in this chamber, in this place and in this nation to say that all Australians, regardless of religion, of background, that you have the right to be safe in this nation, safe from hatred, of freedom, from ancient enmities repackaged. And the fact is today we are facing challenges in this nation that we have not seen since the end of World War II. We have a four-axis nation of dictatorship and authoritarianism who have a single shared enemy, and that is us, and that is democracy. They don't respect compromise. They don't respect appeasement. They exploit it. And exploiting it, they are. China, Russia, Iran and North Korea are working together in new ways to support each other's ambitions. And still, as a coalition of democracies, we've been slow to see this, we've been slow to react. And worse, even worse, we have allowed the hatred, the antisemitism and the discord in our nation to grow unchecked. And it is like our leaders, our national leaders in government, think that if they keep feeding the crocodile, they will get eaten last. But the consequences of that in this nation are deadly. And let's just remind ourselves what has been going on at our campuses and what has then been more widely fermenting. Since the shocking attack on the 7th of October 2023, our Jewish communities have faced one of the most difficult periods in their lives. Holocaust survivors who came to Australia and thought they would be safe have been shocked to discover that they are not. The events of that day, the unprovoked attacks, resulted in 1,200 innocent people being murdered, which sent shockwaves around the world, including Australia. That day of depravity was the greatest loss of Jewish life on a single day in 80 years since the Holocaust. And it awoke and it exposed a shocking anti-Semitic rot in Western democracies, including, sadly, here in Australia. In the face of since then, in the face of this, it has resulted in an over 700% increase in anti-Semitic incidents on Australian soil since October 2023. Australians have witnessed unchecked an unprecedented spike in anti-Semitic activity across our country, in our streets, in our synagogues, outside of people's homes. A synagogue was firebombed in Melbourne. A Jewish daycare centre was firebombed in Sydney. A car was firebombed outside the address of a prominent Jewish leader. And then, of course, a caravan full of explosives was found in suburban Sydney with a map of prominent Jewish targets, including the Great Synagogue. As we know in this place, and we debated yesterday, had this attack occurred, it would have been the most disastrous terrorist attack on Australian soil in history. And the list goes on and on. Synagogues have been sprayed with swastika graffiti. Homes, people's homes where they live and have a right, like any other Australian, to feel safe, have been attacked. And sadly, in my own home state of Western Australia, just last weekend, there were incidents of disgusting anti-Semitic graffiti sprayed across walls, roads and street signs. According to the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, there was 116 anti-Jewish incidents in Western Australia alone. And our community leaders have been left abandoned and disappointed with the lack of response from Labor governments. The Jewish Community Council of Western Australian Vice President Steve Lieblich said that the weak stance from the government emboldens those hate-mongers and agitators who are stirring up the people prepared to take violent action. So, in conclusion, as we reflect on the immense loss of 6 million Jewish lives and countless other minorities during the Holocaust, during one of history's darkest periods, unfortunately, the lessons of 80 years ago must be relearnt, and we must find a way to stand together in this place to make sure that it does not happen again. Thank you.